Folks, today we're going to be continuing on something that we were working on in our last live stream. So in our last live stream, we were doing some refactors, and in the course of doing those refactors, we ended up breaking something in our application, and so we're going to be continuing on that today. If you'd like some more context on what it is that we were doing, I recommend you go back and watch the last 10 or 15 minutes of the last live stream. I'll put a link to the exact time in the description so that you can get an idea of where to start if you're interested in getting some more context on what this live stream is about. But for now, I'm going to assume that everybody who is watching this live stream has seen the last stream, and we're going to continue moving forward. What essentially happened is that in the process of attempting to do a refactor on our headers, some of the information about the view on our mobile application, we ended up breaking the header color. So right here, there's supposed to be this header. You could see a hamburger menu right here, and it's supposed to be like this teal color back here. And then when we go in here, you can see that the top header right now is transparent, where it should again be teal. And this one as well is transparent, where this one should be red. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through and we're going to fix that. Now, that having been said, I want to come back to something that we discussed at the very end of the stream last time, which is writing commit messages in a situation where we're not finished doing work. So this is a commit message we wrote at the end of the last live stream. I think it's worth a review because we're now going to use this commit message, and we're going to see the degree to which a detailed commit message can help us get moving faster at the beginning of a follow-on session if at the end of the previous section there was something that we were in the middle of. Now, one way to get picked up quickly if you have finished somewhere and you're afraid you won't remember what you're going to do next, a common piece of advice there is to write a failing test. And I would say that that's the gold standard from my perspective is the failing unit test because it gets me started the quickest. That having been said, in a case like this one where we're doing a refactor, theoretically, if all of our tests are testing only that things look right rather than testing our individual implementations, all of the tests would pass in the course of a refactor. Or in this case, because we've managed to break something, it's possible that several tests will fail rather than an individual test failing to tell us where we're going to start. So instead, we use this commit message method. So let's take a look at our commit message from last time. We removed project-specific contextual information from the navigation bar, which shows on many pages that do not contain a project. You recall that we made this drawing that showed our different modules within the code, our different pieces of code, as well as the responsibilities of those different pieces. And then we surrounded those pieces of code and their responsibilities with scopes. And so what we were doing in this commit was we were adjusting an inconsistency in who had which responsibilities relative to their scopes of influence inside of the app. So here's what we broke. We still need to determine how to set a default background color in the navbar component for non-project pages so that we're not seeing a clear one in all of these places, right? We also want to determine whether the other settings defaults in the navbar component are working and make sure we only define header color and test red in one place because we were copying and pasting those RGBA values last time. So let's go ahead and get to it. Now, I would actually like to do these in a little bit of a different order than we've indicated here. First of all, we have set a default background color in the navbar component for non-project pages first. What I'd like to do first is determine whether the other settings defaults in the navbar component are working. So what this is about is that in our navbar, up here, we have these like supposed defaults, right? But in particular, we noticed that this one wasn't working. So you'll see we have a default color of black set right here. And if that default color was working, then this background here would be black, and it's not. There is no default color. And so uh, if this default isn't working, I can show you here. This is the one that we changed last time, but there's several that have not been changed. I'm skeptical that any of them are working, and so I want to check that. So the way that I'm going to check that is in navbar settings right here. I'm going to set the title to something that would be very clearly like visible as a default title. An empty string is fine, but it would be difficult for us to tell the difference between empty string and null, which is why I'm changing that. So now I'm going to go over to my classifier navigator, and I'm going to purposely set this instead of setting title, I'm just going to set it straight up to null. And then what I want to do is see if that title is getting set to hello. Okay. Okay, so as you can see, it's not. And so what that's telling me is that these defaults potentially are like all not working. And so now we've established the what, and I want to establish the why. One way that I like to do that in React Native applications is with a good old console.log. I like to do this rather than set breakpoints because I find that in interpreted languages, the breakpoints in my IDE don't get hit with the same reliability as they do with compiled languages like Java or Swift. And also in a React Native app where a lot of things are running asynchronously by design, trying to like stop the program at a certain point might not necessarily work because other parts of the program are going to keep going and you might just end up in a weird state. So instead I use this console.log method. I'm going to be printing some stuff out. So here I'm going to print what are my navbar settings to make this easy to identify, and then I'm going to print out my navbar settings. Then when we refresh this, we're going to come over to our debugging mode. Command Option I to open my inspector. And as you can see, this has happened several times. The reason that this has happened several times is that we've mapped state to props for a whole bunch of different navbar instances at the same time. Those being for each of the different pages that we display. Now that having been said, one thing that you'll notice about what are my navbar settings here is that they're undefined in one case, the very first one, right? So this is the very first time that's been called, which means that this is probably referring to the home page. And then for everywhere else, navbar settings is an object. Now it doesn't always have everything defined. So if you look at, for example, let's open this again. Okay, so we've got this navbar, right? And look, so title, look, here's our navbar settings. What are my navbar settings? The title is null, but the navbar settings themselves are not null. This is an object. And so if we check here whether navbar settings is present and say, well, if navbar settings is present, set the title to this title, otherwise set it to hello, we're not going to end up here except on our home page where navbar settings is null. So this isn't checking that navbar settings.title is there before doing this default. It's doing, and so we're never getting to this default. Now that we understand the why, we've saved ourselves some time because now we don't have to check the what for every single one of these because it's the same case for every single one of these. We've gone one level deeper and we've determined the cause of the issue that we're seeing, and we can see clearly that that cause is going to be present in all of these cases. So we've already checked off one of the items on our commit message list. Determine whether the other settings defaults in the navbar component are working. They're not, and we know why. So that's exciting, but we need to come up with something that would work, right? And that's not going to be this. Now we could do this. If we wanted to. Let me do it all the way through so that you could see what that would look like. So navbar settings dot center, navbar settings dot background color. So what we have going on here is a ternary operator in which we check that the background color, center type, hamburger menu showing, show back title are present. And then if they're not and then if they are present, I should say, we set the object that we're returning to have that for title. And if it's not, we set this default value. So that's fine. There is a shorthand here for this, which we could potentially use. And that looks like this. If navbar settings.title is true, then title gets set to navbar settings.title. Otherwise, if it's false, set it to an empty string like so. Boom. Boom. Yeah, I didn't do this the most typalistically efficient way, probably. Whoops. So, and that's what it would look like in this configuration. Now, the thing about this configuration, this is a little bit, maybe a little bit shorter horizontally. It still leaves a lot for you to sort of parse through with your eyeballs. And so I'm going to recommend a little bit of a different strategy here. So now we've seen two things that would work, the ternary and then the and or operators. Another thing we can use is the default props. So we have this construct available to us in React of setting default props if our prop doesn't have anything in it. And as you can see, we're already using that in this component in a couple of places. And then we also have this default thing up here. So what I'm going to recommend that we do is consolidate the way that we're handling this and do it all either one way or the other way. And I would like to use the default props that React provides for us. So here's how that would look. What I'm going to do is I'm going to steal all of these. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to set all of them. So that one, get rid of this. You know what might be fun is to do, so let's do this. Let's set our cursor right there at navbar settings. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that. I'm going to select all instances of that. Go back to the beginning of the line. Erase it. Come to the end of the token and replace that with a colon and bring it back to the edge of the line like that. Is that what I want? Yeah, so now I'm going to come back to the beginning right here and I'm going to get rid of these extra spaces. I can't do that. Okay. So let me get out of column mode here, get rid of these two lines and pull each of these back 2 spaces. Cool. So now we have show logo. So now I'm going to make sure we don't have anything twice. We have show logo, show avatar, title, show back. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put these alphabetically. QRST. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. Where does H go after C? Okay. Okay, so background color, center type, hamburger menu showing, show logo, show avatar, show back, and title. Great, so we don't have anything in there twice. That's excellent. Now let's come back up to the top. So now what happens if we completely get rid of all of these? Suppose that we take, ooh, whoa, 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 whoa. Suppose that we take each of these and come to the end and just get rid of them. Now what would happen? Well, things would work, except in the case of the home page. So what's wrong? Cannot read property title of undefined. Because you'll recall that when we're looking at our console.logs here, what we saw was that our navigation settings were undefined in only one case. And what was that case? It was when we were on the home page. Console. Am I spelling console correctly? We got rid of those, didn't we? Well, let's put them back because I'm trying to demonstrate something here. Y'all are like, yeah, we get it. There we go. All right. It'll take like 4 seconds. Everybody relax. All right, so we could see all this here, right? Navigation bar settings, undefined, right? So we still have to have a default here of we have to have something that happens in the case of nav bar settings not being there. And instead of doing an individual ternary operators on every single one of those, I'd like to introduce the idea of a guard clause. So a guard clause here is going to, before, essentially what a guard clause does is it's an implementation of ensuring that you have all of the right inputs before you do work inside of a method. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to say if we don't have navbar settings, we're going to return something a little bit different. Instead of returning all this stuff we have on lines 26 through 32, we are going to return an object with only our user in it, which we're going to pull out of the state. I tend to always put these commas at the end in case we add something here later. Now, what's this going to do? Now, none of these other things are going to get set, and as a result, we're going to end up using these defaults down here. All right, so let's take a look again. I'm lost. Why are you mad? Spaces. All right, so this is our guard clause. You'll notice that I didn't do an else here. Instead, I left that return value where it is. And I know that if we return right here, we're never going to get to this return, so I don't need an else. In this case, I am taking advantage of the fact that I'm returning right here to demonstrate, hey, this is a special case. This isn't one branch of a set of branches that should happen with equal frequency. Rather, this is a special offshoot case that really shouldn't happen. And the standard behavior, the behavior that we're expecting, is the one that does not live inside the confines of a conditional. So that's our guard clause. If everything's working as expected, we should now see a black header background. And we do. So this is exciting, right? We've gotten a piece of our work done. But black isn't what we want that to look like, right? We don't want it to be black. We want it to be this kind of teal color. That teal color is referred to in our themes as header color somewhere. Right there. We don't see a preview of it because I think the previews only show up on hex values, and this is an RGBA value. I'm not sure why it's an RGBA value, because the purpose of having an RGBA value would be to include this alpha channel right here to determine transparency. However, when the alpha channel is set to 1, the color is opaque. So either it's possible that the design tool that we were using at the time would only give you RGBA values. I'm not sure why these aren't hexes. This one, I understand why it's not a hex, because here we have an alpha channel that's not 1. Here we have an alpha channel that's not 1. Here we have an alpha channel of 0. This is going to be completely clear, and we see that in the fact that it's named transparent. Okay, so anyway, that's the default. That's the default we want. So let's go back to navbar. Navbar. Right. So here's where we're setting our default values. However, we can't just do header color here. It doesn't know what that is. This is one of the things that we determined last time too. We tried to do this and it doesn't work. So the reason it doesn't work is that right here, the app doesn't know what those theme things are. So this is a good opportunity to talk a little bit about scope. Last time, we also talked about scope, and now we're going to talk about a little bit different version of scope. In software engineering, when we're talking about scope, we're usually talking about the context in which a piece of code has influence or should have influence. So if we're talking about a class's scope, as far as its responsibilities, that that scope could mean the places where this class is shown on screen and the places where this class should have responsibilities. Inside of programming, an individual variable's scope is the scope in which the compiler understands the value to which that variable is pointing. And what you'll notice is that here inside of our styles, inside of the style sheet itself, those themes are in scope. Now out here in the default props, they're not in scope. So what we're going to need to do here is explicitly import them. So the way that we do that is we can come up here. Let's take a look at where these live. I have so many things open. Theme here. So what is it? It exports a default. That means that this is the thing that we're exporting. It's one object with all of these keys in it. What did I do? Did I do this? I don't feel like I did that. Was that there? Look, anyway, okay. So we know that we have this object that we're exporting, and so we're going to need to explicitly name that when we do our import. So let's do import theme from. Where are we right now? Mobile source components navbar. And the theme is at mobile source theme. Okay, so it's one directory up. We have to come out of components. So we'll do a relative import like this of theme. And then down here, we should be able to do theme header color. Cute. Let's give it a try. Okay, so we have our teal here. We have our teal here. We have our teal here. We have teal here. But that's kind of a problem, right? We want it to be red in preview. But let's make sure it's teal everywhere. It's teal everywhere. That's pretty exciting. Does this project just like not have a name? What is going on with that? That I have questions about, but we'll keep moving for now because it appears to be what is happening? Is it everybody? Weird. Oh, you know why it is? Do you know why it is? This is my fault. It's because my testing, we set that to null to be able to determine if the default title was working, and then I didn't set it back. Silly, silly, silly. Now that having been said, this is a really good time to talk about something, which is that we want to make sure that we are reviewing all of our changes before we push anything to commit. So it can be easy to assume that you know what all changes you made and commit directly a change set. I like to review my change sets before I make a commit, because something like that we would catch. We would look at this and realize, like say that we put this back for a second so that you can see this, right? So if this is my code, as I'm going through it, I'll realize, oh, I didn't mean to leave that. This is also really helpful for making sure that you're cleaning up after your intermediary comments and your like logging and that kind of thing. Reviewing your changes is a really excellent antidote to leaving your debugging crap in the code when you commit. Because changing stuff and seeing what happens is an excellent way to learn, but it's also an excellent way to introduce problems if you don't clean up after yourself. Should we leave this space here? The reason that I wouldn't is because that way it might not be as noticeable that we're putting a bang on it. But this is, I feel like, not customary. I'm going to leave it like this for now, and then if somebody gets upset, they could fix it the way they want to. Maybe we one-line this. I don't know. I don't know. I'm quibbling. This doesn't matter. All right, so let's address that right there. So these components, this component here, this whole thing right here is our home page, and then each of these individual components is referred to as a discipline. So we have a bunch of projects inside the discipline of the arts, theoretically, and a bunch inside the discipline of biology, theoretically. So we have this component called project disciplines, and that's the one that contains them all, right here. And then inside of that is a list of disciplines. So here's our discipline. Then when we click on a discipline, we get to a list of projects. We refer to that in our components as project list. And you don't necessarily have to know all of this. What you would do in a case like this is you would look at your discipline, for example, and you would take a look at what's supposed to happen when you click on this discipline. And you'll see we track some event, and then we set up some props, and then we navigate to a thing called a project list. So the project list is where we're going next. This is our project list, and as we could see, we import navbar here. So we'll have the opportunity to make changes to our navbar at this project list level, which will be good because here we need this to be red. Okay, so where are we messing around with the navbar? I really appreciate a good old text search sometimes. Set navbar settings for page. We've seen this method before. We saw this method in our last live stream where we were changing some of the settings that we provide to the navbar. We were changing isPreview in particular to provide something lower level called color. So here, we can also include color. And for color here, how do we want to do this? It's going to be one of two colors, right? It's going to be either test red if we're in preview mode, or it's going to be header color if we're not in preview mode. So we can do something like this for now. In our navbar. Let's see if that works. I didn't check if this is in scope. I just like rammed it right in. This could potentially not work. So we see that it doesn't. This is good to know. Although here I did something wrong, as a matter of fact, which is the in project list. I put color here, and I think we want that to be background color. But I'm not sure. Let's take a look at navbar and make sure I'm right about that. Yep, background color. Look, we did it wrong. I did it wrong. All right, we have that. We still have this at test red, so it's still defaulting. Let's do something here to determine whether the scope is our issue. Let's include a hex value that's legible throughout our code, regardless of scopes. So this hex value has what we would call a global scope, as opposed to test red. Can y'all see me? You can see me enough. All right. Hopefully I'm not making you seasick by moving you around. All right. Boom. We could see our background is black, so this is telling us what we have here is a scoping issue. So here we can explicitly import our theme again. So we have, where are we? Source, components, projects, project list, and theme is source. So we have to back out of components and project this time. So this time we need to import theme from up one directory, up two directories, theme. And now we go down. Now, we have a couple of options for this one. We can either put no here and allow our default on the nav bar to set that to teal. This will work. Right? You can see stuff is teal. Ooh, it's not teal. Rather, I guess what I mean by that is that at the top here, our default is setting it to teal. But I want to be explicit about this. So now we see it's not working. But even if it did work, I want to be explicit everywhere about what color I want things to be. And that might make things potentially a little bit harder to change these colors later because they might be defined, not defined in multiple places, but set in multiple places. However, the alternative, if I were to not set that here, is that someone then has to go figure out where the default gets set if we need to change it, or it might not be clear to somebody looking at this what the behavior is. They might think that this is getting set to transparent or something on purpose. So we're going to be explicit and make something that's easier to read and harder to modify under the assumption that programmers most of the time are reading a line of code rather than modifying it. So that is how I refactor for explicitness. What am I looking? Okay. What I am looking for. Sweet. 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 So this is our museum mode that we're working on. So it's on purpose that you can't back out of this. Now, there's something that you're going to notice about this, which is a little bit off, which is that we have this test red set here, but our like container here still thinks that this is supposed to be teal. So in a mobile app, this is typically called like a safe view container or something like that. So I want to go see how that's set now and figure out why that's happening, because it's basically that thing is supposed to match your header, which it does if your header is teal, and it doesn't if your header is, well, it does here. So let's take a look at what's happening here. We have title, show back, is preview, background color, and center type. Is preview is the thing that we're trying to remove everywhere. So let's see what happens if we remove is preview and only set our nav bar based on the aesthetic expectations. All right, so preview. Oh, would you look at that? It stays teal when we don't include that. It's kind of weird. Why does it do that? Let's see if we can find like a component that uses this. So here we have our app. That's not really what I want. Let's go look at our whole app. There's so much things open. Let me get rid of, I don't think we need to have so much stuff open. So check it out. We're in our app here. And so this is going to be our, like what we're rendering top to bottom. Provider, persist gate, safe. Ooh, safe area container. So I have a feeling this is the thing that's getting represented here, because this area was like the various phone related tchotchkes in the background is frequently referred to as the safe area. So let's go take a look at it. We're now in the safe area container. Oh, look at this, y'all. We have background style here, and then props is preview. And if props is preview is true, we set the styles to include the preview background, which is test red. And if it's not in preview mode, then we set styles to the default background, which is Zooniverse teal, which is the same as header color. So we should change that to be one thing. Where is Zooniverse teal? Zero, 151, 157, 1. No, we do not need it defined two different places. So we're going to do, this is going to be quick. Everywhere where this is, we're going Zooniverse teal throughout the app. Now, when I'm doing a replace all like this, I like to just check. Oh, you know what? I'm seeing some stuff in the bundle here. I don't love that. So what I'm actually going to do is back out of this change. And we'll make it at the end. We'll try it at the end. But first I want to, because there's a bunch of stuff in the Android bundle, I just want to get through a working implementation of this and then potentially come back around to that. Okay, so your safe area container navbar project list. So it turns out is preview here. We don't need it to set the navigation bar anymore, but we use it at the level of the safe area container. So we have two options here, one of which is to remove is preview at the level of the safe area container and set the background color that way. And the other option is to leave is preview in place in all of the places where we need the header to match. The reason that I'm hesitating to do the first one is that background color is the kind of property that might be set on like a lot of different components. And so I could see us accidentally changing the safe area container in areas where we don't mean to because we're setting a background color property on something that isn't the header. So what I'm going to do for now is cheat and come over to classifier navigator. Or rather, hold on, what's the place where it's not doing it right? Yeah. So in here, show back is preview. So we'll set is preview here. Let's see how it looks. I like to check the non-museum mode ones first because once you're in a museum one, you can't back out and you're stuck. So that's the way it's supposed to look. I'm going to include a comment. Because I want to come back to this. Now, some people say don't put to-dos in like this because they just end up being there forever. I think that you as a development team get to make a choice about whether that happens. And ultimately, I think that it's worth rethinking the choice to not provide context for the future out of the belief that no one will act on it. I think that there's something to be said for creating a precedent on your team of acting on this kind of thing when it makes sense to do so. I'm also going to include this in the commit message itself, I think. All right, so let's take a look at our commit message again. What did we do? Set a default background color navbar component for non-project pages. We did that. Determine whether the other settings in the navbar component are working. We did that first. Make sure we only define header color and test red in one place rather than copy pasting the RGBA values. We did replace our hard-coded RGBA values with header color and test red when we were importing it in various components. So now I think we're ready to make a commit. Let's take a look at our changes. So we added is preview and navigate to classifier. We redid the way we handle defaults. Inside of our navigation bar. Very exciting. We imported the theme and then set the background color as per our new background color attribute on our nav bar. And finally, I'm going to change this back for now. And we're going to do header color in a separate commit. Okay. I'm happy with this. So here's our old commit message. So what are we going to say about this? Repaired default and preview background colors on navigation bar. as per comments from previous commit message. I like to include context. At some point, we still should consider decoupling preview mode from the color of the safe area container. Reason for that is that the scope of our safe area container is every single page of our application. And preview mode literally only applies to projects. So only the components that, or rather the components that deal with projects are the ones that it makes the most sense to give the responsibility of determining whether we should have preview colors or not preview colors. That wasn't within the scope of the refactor that we just did, and so I'm going to leave it out for now, but I'm going to include context to do it later. Okay. All right, let's commit. It's going to tell me there's a bazillion warnings because it always does. 66 warnings. I have not found the warnings found feature to be useful in this ID. I think it's a little too sensitive. 2 added and edited to-do items were found. Would you like to review them? We're going to commit those. We talked about those already. Great, so we have a commit. While our tests run, do we want to try to change that header colors universe teal thing? Let's take a look at where it appears. Header color. So the thing that made me back out the first time was that it's in the Android bundle. Now the thing is, I think these files get regenerated when we make a new version of the app. So what I'm going to do for now is go ahead and clean it up. And know that when we regenerate, we should be fine. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go here. And I'm going to say replace header color with Zooniverse teal. And I'm going to do it one by one. So I'm not going to do it in the theme. I'm going to do it inside drawer content. I'm going to do it in style text. That one, that one, that one, that one, that one, that one. I'm going to leave all this bundle stuff out of it. And then I'm going to get rid of this. Oh, my computer is hot right now. All right, now if I look up header color, I should only get those Android bundle files. Cool, cool, cool. So now, if we reboot, everything should still be copacetic. And we then only have our color defined in one place. Okay, fantastic. So let's look at our change list. Literally the only things that should have changed this time are changing header color to Zooniverse teal. I prefer the name Zooniverse teal to header color because, like, I can tell, like, I already get context from this. That what we're doing here is we're setting the background color on the navigation bar. I don't need to know that we're setting the header color because all this additional information tells me that we're setting the header color. What I don't know from this additional information is what color it is I'm setting it to. So I prefer a color name that tells me something about the color rather than a name that tells me about the location of that color in the application. A lot of times also thematic colors will go in several different places in the application. And so if you make it a pattern that you define your colors based on their context rather than the actual color, you can end up forcing yourself to define the same color multiple times that way. Okay, so we did that. Zooniverse teal, 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 teal. Then we get rid of that one. Cute. All right, so unify. What are we doing here? Unify a duplicate color in the theme file under the name Zooniverse teal. Remove references to header color, which was the same color. So I'm including the name header color in the commit because if somebody has an issue with header color not being defined later and they search the commit message history to figure out what happened, I want them to be able to find this. So this is providing some insurance for myself to make it clear to other developers where header color became undefined. Go meet. Ooh, some stuff failed. Oh, we have some snapshots that we need to fix. We already had some snapshots that we needed to fix. Let me update the snapshots real quick. And I want to say that we did this kind of recently, so yeah, it was this. So now we're updating our snapshot tests. I need to read up a little more on snapshot tests on account of the fact that I've never experienced a response to them failing other than to update them and then they automatically pass. I tend to use more unit tests and integration tests even in React Native apps, but I need to understand snapshot tests better than I currently do for sure. But in the meantime, I'm going to add that and then update snapshot tests with npm. What was the command that we used? I know it seems superfluous to include the command, but as you just saw, I got the command out of my Git history. I like use version control pretty heavy-handedly to keep track of things and communicate things to other developers. I think it's an extremely valuable tool and an often underutilized tool for sharing context. In fact, I might even argue that those to-dos that we included are unnecessary in the presence of the contextual commit. I'm going to leave them for now, but I would be ambivalent as to whether we needed to include those with the contextual commit provided. Okay, so let's take a look real quick at our commits. We repaired default and preview background colors on navigation bar. One thing I will do is put all of these in the present tense because this one is like in the imperative and then this one's in the past tense. It's not that important, but at any rate, it's an opportunity to demonstrate an interactive rebase again. So, oh, actually, I want that one. It's this one that I want to change. So now it's going to give me the opportunity to amend this. Repair default and preview background colors on navigation bar. Yep. So now I should be copacetic. I should be good. Unify, repair. Yes. Okay, so we already ran the tests and saw that they passed, but might as well check again right before we push. Now, once again, what we were doing here was a refactor. So if we've written our tests at the appropriate level of abstraction, we're not having to change them in order to perform this refactor. And now we're ready to push. Fantastic. So what I'll do is in the show notes, I'll include a link to these specific commits so that you have the opportunity to peruse the code for yourself. But in the meantime, have a fantastic afternoon, and I'm going to go ahead and get to work on those show notes.